What if the ultimate threat to your personal freedom wasn't an economic crash, a global surveillance grid, or a border restriction, but a series of quietly filed legal modifications sitting inside a state legislative database? Imagine walking into your garage on a crisp Tuesday morning, turning the key of a vehicle you rebuilt with your own bare hands, and realizing that the very act of starting its engine has officially made you a criminal. We are taught to believe that the primary enemy of the classic automobile is time, rust, oxidation, and the slow decay of rubber gaskets. But the forensic truth is far more calculated. The modern automotive landscape is being aggressively restructured, not to eliminate carbon emissions, but to erase the last remaining fortress of untrackable, unupdatable, and completely sovereign private property. Right now, beneath the cover of routine bureaucratic language, legal frameworks are being tested that shift your right to drive from a fundamental element of ownership into a heavily conditional administrative privilege. They aren't coming for your keys with a flatbed truck. They are engineering an environment of mechanical suffocation that turns durable mechanical icons into leaking piles of scrap metal sitting on garage floors. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is a systematic, data-driven legislative blueprint spreading across the globe, designed to wear down enthusiasts until they willingly surrender their analog machines to the crusher. Tonight, we disassemble the legal mechanisms, examine the global precedents, and uncover the real reason why the establishment is terrified of an engine with no microchips, no satellite modems, and no digital kill switches. This is Engine Forensic, and this is the opening shot of the war on the analog machine. 1. Decoding HF 3865, the legislative trap hidden in plain sight. The most devastating maneuvers in modern governance are almost never executed through sweeping, dramatic prohibitions. Instead, they are meticulously wrapped in dull, technocratic vocabulary designed to put the public to sleep. Phrases like adjusting usage scope, minor technical modifications, or streamlining compliance structures are engineered to mask radical shifts in civil liberties. In late February 2026, Minnesota lawmakers quietly introduced Bill HF 3865. On its surface, the official description reads like a harmless piece of routine administrative housekeeping. Authority to operate collectors' vehicles modified and technical changes made. But when you strip away the layers of bureaucratic camouflage and subject the text to a forensic legal analysis, the trap becomes immediately apparent. Bill HF 3865 does not outright criminalize the possession of a classic car. Rather, it radically rewrites the legal definition of what you are allowed to do with it. Under this framework, collector vehicles are forced into a tightly restricted operational window, confined strictly to Saturdays and Sundays from sunrise to sunset. Furthermore, the legislation stipulates that operating these vehicles is only considered legal if the trip is directly tied to organized public events, such as a sanctioned exhibition, a community parade, or a registered car show. This means if you decide to fire up a 1970 Ford F-100 on a quiet Wednesday afternoon just to clear the fuel lines or enjoy a therapeutic drive down a country road, you are explicitly violating state law. You are transformed into a criminal for operating your own legally registered, paid-for property. By leaving terms like exhibition and display intentionally vague and completely undefined, the bill hands broad, highly subjective discretionary power to law enforcement. Your freedom to move is completely decoupled from ownership, reduced instead to a fragile administrative pass that can be revoked at a moment's notice. 2. The mechanics of suffocation, how laws physically kill engines. To fully understand the cruelty of HF 3865, one must look past the legal text and look straight into the engine bay. A classic automobile is not a static piece of art meant to be frozen behind a velvet rope. It is a living, breathing mechanical ecosystem that demands regular physical movement to survive. When a government passes a law that limits a vehicle's operation to 2 days a week or forces it into long periods of seasonal storage, it isn't just restricting the driver, it is actively executing the machine. This is a process mechanics call mechanical suffocation. An older engine relies entirely on continuous fluid circulation to maintain its structural integrity. The moment a cast iron V8 sits idle for weeks on end, the protective film of motor oil coat gravity pulls down into the oil pan, leaving the internal cylinder walls, camshaft lobes, and valve trains completely exposed to ambient oxygen. Moisture in the air condenses inside the block, initiating localized oxidation and micro-pitting on precision machined metal surfaces. Simultaneously, the fuel system begins to degrade. Modern ethanol-blended gasoline is highly hygroscopic, meaning it actively draws moisture out of the atmosphere. When left stagnant in a carburetor bowl or a mechanical fuel pump, the fuel undergoes a chemical breakdown, turning into a thick, gummy varnish that plugs up jets, sticks needle valves, and corrodes brass floats. 3. The test tube state why Minnesota matters to every garage in America. It is incredibly easy for an enthusiast sitting in Texas, Florida, or Ohio to look at the legislative landscape of St. Paul, Minnesota, and think, this is a localized regional issue that has absolutely nothing to do with me. That assumption is a catastrophic misreading of how public policy is manufactured and exported in the United States. In the architecture of American politics, certain states operate as policy test tubes or incubator grounds for progressive control measures. Minnesota has historically served as a prime testing ground for urban modernization and regulatory policies. When an aggressive, highly restrictive bill like HF 3865 is introduced, special interest groups and legislative architects are watching closely to measure the level of public resistance. If the car culture in that state is quiet, disorganized, or complacent, and the bill passes into law without substantial political friction, it instantly becomes a standardized blueprint. This legal code is packaged, branded as a common-sense safety and environmental modernization initiative, and distributed via legislative exchange networks to other states. 4. The digital kill switch, the obsolescence of OBD3, and the connected cage to discover the real motive behind the legislative assault on classic automobiles. We have to look at what these vintage machines lack. Consider a classic American power plant, a small block Chevy 350, or a Ford Windsor V8. These engines are beautifully, defiantly analog. They feature no turbochargers, no high-pressure common rail injection systems, and absolutely zero electronic sensors monitoring every microsecond of combustion. If you provide them with clean oil, basic spark, and a steady stream of coolant, these cast iron blocks will run for hundreds of thousands, sometimes even millions of miles. If they fail mechanically, meaning any individual with a basic set of wrenches, an inexpensive replacement part, and a bit of determination can fix them in a residential driveway. Now contrast that mechanical autonomy with a vehicle manufactured in 2026. A modern car is essentially a rolling server stack, packed with anywhere from 50 to 150 separate electronic control units (ECUs), tied together by complex CAN bus wiring networks. If a single proprietary nitrous oxide sensor glitches, or if an emissions control module goes down and fails to receive an over-the-air software update from a corporate server, the vehicle's central computer triggers a hard fault, locking the entire machine into a useless limp home mode. The modern vehicle does not fail mechanically, it fails digitally, locking the owner out completely and forcing a total dependence on authorized corporate service centers. Worse still is the arrival of the OBD3 standard and continuous remote monitoring. Government agencies are aggressively moving away from traditional, point-in-time annual vehicle inspections. Instead, OBD3 architecture utilizes built-in satellite and cellular modems to continuously stream live vehicle diagnostics, emissions metrics, and telemetry data directly to state regulatory databases while you drive down the highway. Your car has been transformed into a corporate informant. This is exactly where the classic car becomes a massive, intolerable anomaly to the establishment. A vintage automobile has no diagnostic port, no cellular modem, no firmware to patch, and no digital gateway. It cannot be tracked, it cannot be monitored, and most importantly, it possesses no digital kill switch. In a world where the state desires the ability to press a button and instantly disable the mobility of any citizen or clear a grid during an administrative lockdown, an unchipped, purely mechanical machine stands out as a dangerous island of absolute personal privacy. The environmental myth, dissecting the 0.1% reality. The primary rhetorical weapon wielded by lawmakers backing bills like HF 3865 is the moral crusade of environmental preservation and urban emissions reduction. They paint a picture of vintage muscle cars and classic trucks choking city streets with plumes of unburned hydrocarbons. But when you subject this environmental argument to rigorous mathematical validation, the entire narrative collapses into absolute irrelevance. According to extensive data compiled by organizations like the Specialty Equipment Market Association and Hagerty Insurance, collector and classic vehicles account for less than 0.1% of the total vehicle miles driven in the United States each year. The vast majority of these cars are meticulously maintained, climate-stored icons that only see the asphalt a few hundred miles a year, mostly on pristine summer weekends. Let's look at the raw forensic math. Dollar text annual fleet impact stuck left. Frac text collector annual miles 1500, text modern fleet annual miles 15 crite, times e-text collector fleet share 0.01, $0.0016. The economic shockwave, dismantling the restoration economy. When you squeeze the right to drive an analog vehicle, the initial economic damage doesn't stop with the individual car owner. It strikes an incredibly massive, interconnected economic ecosystem built entirely around vintage mechanical culture. SEMA market reports indicate that the automotive specialty equipment and aftermarket industry is a massive pillar of the American economy, directly supporting more than 1 million high-paying domestic jobs and generating tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue. This industry is not comprised of faceless mega-corporations. It is powered by an army of independent restoration technicians, local machine shops, precision parts fabricators, specialty painters, chrome platers, and master craftsmen who spend hundreds of hours hand-stitching custom leather interiors. These are specialized positions requiring years of tribal knowledge and mechanical skill that cannot be automated or outsourced to overseas software teams. 7. Global blueprints. Lessons from California's bureaucratic squeeze. If you still believe that this slow, bureaucratic strangulation of car culture is a far-off hypothetical scenario, you need to closely study the regulatory history of California. The Golden State was once universally celebrated as the global epicenter of hot rod culture, custom cruisers, and classic American muscle. But over the last several decades, Sacramento has executed a masterclass in how to slowly dismantle a lifestyle without ever passing an explicit front-page ban. In California, while vehicles manufactured before 1975 are currently granted an exemption from traditional biennial smog checks, any vehicle built from 1976 onward is subjected to an incredibly hostile, high-friction regulatory environment. If an enthusiast attempts to perform an engine swap, modernize a fuel system, or make any significant alteration to a post-1975 collector car, they are immediately funneled into the Bureau of Automotive Repair Referee Program. 8. The European precedent. Low-emission zones and economic dispossession. To see the final, mature phase of this anti-analog blueprint, we must look across the Atlantic to the urban centers of Western Europe. Cities like London, Paris, and Berlin have become highly advanced testing grounds for a process known as economic dispossession through geography. This strategy avoids the messy political battles of outright car bans by simply erecting invisible digital borders around major metropolitan zones, enforced by massive networks of automated license plate recognition cameras. Consider London's ultra-low emission zone. On paper, the program is marketed as a progressive, health-focused initiative to clean up urban air quality. In practice, it functions as a highly regressive economic wall. If an owner wishes to drive an older, non-compliant classic or vintage vehicle into the designated zone, they are hit with a crushing daily charge. They haven't made owning the car illegal, They have simply made using the car so punishingly expensive that its functional utility is completely deleted for the average middle-class citizen. Only the ultra-wealthy retain the financial capacity to pay the daily fines required to enjoy their classic machines in public spaces. 9. The deeper tragedy, the death of the right to repair beneath the loss of property rights, the economic damage to restoration shops, and the physical degradation of the vehicles themselves, lies the deepest, most permanent consequence of this legislative shift: the complete erasure of hands-on mechanical literacy from the human fabric. For over a century, the automobile was the ultimate vehicle for American self-reliance. It was a rite of passage for generations of daughters and sons to stand over an open engine bay with a parent, learning how to set valve lash, clean spark plugs, rebuild a carburetor, or swap a transmission. These raw, physical tasks taught people an invaluable cognitive framework: the understanding that when something breaks, you don't throw it away, and you don't beg a multinational corporation for a software patch. You pick up a tool, diagnose the physical failure, and fix it yourself. 10. The final forensic analysis, the soul of the machine. When we subject Bill HF 3865 and the global push against analog machinery to a final forensic examination, the conclusion is clear. This conflict was never truly about a fraction of a percent of tailpipe emissions. It was never about a few individuals abusing collector plates to save a couple of bucks on their annual registration fees. This is a quiet, structural war over the concept of structural independence. A cast-iron American V8, a mechanical fuel pump, a manual gearbox, and an old-school carburetor are not just collections of refined metal parts. They are working, functional monuments to an era of engineering that prioritized durability over planned obsolescence and individual capability over total corporate dependence. They are the physical evidence of a culture that knew how to build things that lasted a lifetime. The defense of the classic car is not a trivial hobby or a matter of weekend nostalgia. It is a direct defense of the right to own private property that operates completely outside the control of a corporate or governmental server. Every time an enthusiast fights back against an arbitrary usage restriction, signs a petition, challenges a vague piece of motor vehicle code, or simply fires up a vintage engine and drives it down an open road, they are keeping a vital piece of human independence alive. The real question we face in 2026 is not whether our classic cars can survive the future, but how much of our mechanical soul we are willing to surrender to the system before we lose our freedom to move altogether. The truth is always deeper than the surface. This has been Engine Forensic. Stay curious, keep your wrenches clean, and look closer at the machinery in your garage. If you want to protect these fundamental mechanical values, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can stand against this digital tide together. Turn the key, check your oil, and never let the analog flame die out.